to our second episode of Maritime's Watch, Atlantic Canada's only dedicated program looking at corruption and the misuse of public resources. I'm your host, Don Bowser, the president of Impact, a local NGO that looks at corruption and other issues. Tonight's episode is called Rocketmen, and it's going to be a little bit more complicated than usual. It's a tale about Ukrainian-Canadian cooperation, and hence why I'm wearing my Vyshyvanka tonight. All right. Nova Scotia seems like it has everything, right? Fantastic beaches, great towns, beautiful woods, pretty much has everything. What is it missing? A spaceport. That's right. The one thing that Nova Scotia probably needs is a spaceport, right? And this is what we're going to look at. There's a large-scale project that's looking at building a rocket launch facility in Canso, Nova Scotia. Why Canso? I would have thought that Stewiacke probably would have been a better location, given that it's halfway between the North Pole and the equator. But the site that was selected for launching rockets in eastern Canada is in Hazel Hill near Canso. How was this site selected? Well, it was gone through a competitive process, allegedly, by a company that was set up in Halifax called Maritime Launch Services. Maritime Launch Services is a company by an American rocket business developer, John Isla, who was working at the time for a Ukrainian company called Yuzhnoye. Yuzhnoye is the state design bureau of the rocket building facilities of Yuzhnoye and Yuzhmash in Ukraine. So at the behest, or at least under the auspices of Yuzhnoye, John Isla set up Maritime Launch Services. So, must be a big company, right? Well, not quite. It was started with Isla himself, didn't have the resources and the manpower to do things just by himself. He brought in a company called United Paradigm Corporation, which was fellow Rocketmen from the US who had been working together with him on different projects. So Maritime Launch Services was established in 2016. It has an office in Halifax, or at least has a representative office in Halifax. And this company has set out for a very ambitious project of $111 million investment in eastern Nova Scotia. Canso, like the rest of Atlantic Canada, suffers from a lack of employment and the search for large-scale development. So once Maritime Launch Services, or MLS, was established, immediately then the hunt was on to find private investors. Should be some good venture capital out there, right? Very sexy project in terms of large-scale rocket launching. Now, MLS then started to make the rounds, talk to a number of federal and provincial governments and government employees to look at this project. It was when they made the announcement in Canso that Canso was selected and that they were going to make the investment. It was said that it was strongly supported by both the provincial and federal governments, and particularly Global Affairs Canada was eager to work with them because of the connection, of course, with the Ukrainian rocket producers. So MLS is forging ahead with two key Ukrainian partners, Yuzhnoye and Yuzhmash. Yuzhnoye is the front office of the Ukrainian rocket business. It's the one that does business development. It's the one that looks at financing, and they also supply the design for the rockets. Yuzhmash is the production facility. It's where they actually build the rockets. So MLS has gone ahead, looked around, gotten a number of key stakeholders on board, started to look for the financing. Sounds all good, right? Well, after the announcement that they were going to build in Hazel Hill, John Isla was eased out of the business. And that left us with just Yuzhnoye, Yuzhmash, and United Paradigm Corporation. Now, if the American side of this, if United Paradigm Corporation, which is a smallish type corporation that does a number of business deals in the rocket business, doesn't have the resources to be able for themselves to build this project, then surely the Ukrainian side would, right? Well, it's a very interesting story. Yuzhnoye is a very infamous company when we look at the rocket business. They've been involved in a number of international projects across the board. One is called Sea Launch, which was going to launch rockets from an ocean drilling platform. And there was also the Brazilian project, Alcantara, that was going to do the same thing that they're trying to do in Canso, set up a space launch facility. Both of those projects failed, and failed rather spectacularly, and ended up in international legal disputes. Right, okay, so they didn't have much luck on their international projects. But surely the Ukrainian side does have a success in terms of their domestic and near neighbors policies. Well, the reason why the Ukrainians wanted to have a launch facility in Canada was because they have an ongoing conflict with Russia, so they've lost their ability to launch from the Russian space launch sites, and also the question of Baikonur in Kazakhstan. And also, the Ukrainian side needed to find partners that would be able to willing to help them put this together. Now, Yuzhnoye has a problem. It's rife, like the rest of the Ukrainian defense industry, with corruption and malfeasance. In fact, there's a dedicated webpage that looks at nothing but the corruption between Dektarov, the director of Yuzhnoye, and Yuzhnoye. So we have decades-long case after case after case of where the misuse of resources has been alleged with Yuzhnoye. And now there's a number of criminal cases as well. Not just from the Ukrainian prosecutor's office, but also from the military prosecutor's office, specifically looking at the misuse of state resources, even on military projects. That should be very concerning to everyone involved. Now, you would think that perhaps it was just a bad apple, right? Just one company that's not acting properly. But the history of Canadian and Ukrainian space projects goes a little bit beyond just this current project in Atlantic Canada. There's Ukrocosmos and the project Libid, which was going to build a satellite communications platform. Now, the Libid project was together with McDonald, DeWittler and Associates, our large Canadian space construction and engineering firm based in Montreal. Wait, a Montreal-based engineering firm? That sounds a little bit suspicious, doesn't it? Sounds a little bit like the SNC-Lavalin case. Right. So, MDA, as it's known, was involved with a project together with Ukrocosmos, getting money from Export Development Corporation of Canada, and then it was going to launch this satellite communications platform. How did that story end? Well, it ended up with $8.25 going missing from the project and sent to a Cyprus-based account under the direction of the director and a consultant who's a former manager at Ukrocosmos. So what we see is this is an actual ongoing criminal case right now at the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, looking specifically at Ukrocosmos. So this isn't the first time that Canadian-Ukrainian space projects have ended up in this level of malfeasance. So you would think that would be sort of a warning sign. No. 2017, Canada and Ukraine signed a memorandum of understanding that they would cooperate together in space, and one of those key projects would be this spaceport in Canso. So I guess we haven't really learned our lesson in terms of that. So what now? Well, we have a company, MLS, who's operating and going to operate the building of this spaceport facility. They've done their environmental assessment, and the Nova Scotia government, for its credit, has pushed back and said that the environmental assessment is not sufficient for what actually is needed. But they also need the capital to realize the project. Now the problem is MLS has gone to the private equity market, and they've hired a lobby firm / assistance firm that's going to help them try to mobilize the resources to be able to build this project, called Jacob Capital Investments. Halifax Examiner has already looked into this, and a big shout out to my colleagues at Halifax Examiner with whom I'm cooperating together on this project. Now, the Halifax Examiner detailed how Jacob Capital Investments is not only looking for money from venture capitalists, but it is also looking for federal and provincial funding for this project. So we have lobbying that's gone on. We have allegedly the very strong support of Global Affairs Canada, Madame Friedland, the minister, has MLS has stated that she stands firmly behind this project, but we also have some of the local MPs, not just the local MP, Roger Kushner, but also, strangely, an MP from New Brunswick, Elena Lockhart, whose portfolio really doesn't cover this. She looks at small business in terms of her responsibilities, which really doesn't cover a large-scale investment of a rocket launch facility. So MLS is trying to raise the capital, but seems to be having some problems with this. What do the venture capitalists know that we don't know? Another great concern. So at the end of the day, what are we left with? Well, we're left with some very dodgy Ukrainian partners who have a long history of corruption and malfeasance. We're left with a company that really doesn't seem that solidly based in Nova Scotia. The CEO, current CEO from United Paradigm Corporation, does not yet have his Canadian work visa, nor is he resident here. Their office appears to be just simply a mailbox office in downtown Halifax, administered by a local lawyer. So MLS doesn't seem to have the resources. They don't seem to be able to get the resources very easily. So what's going to happen if something goes wrong? As we've learned from the past, from things like the tidal projects, if these international consortiums run out of funds and something goes wrong, then who does the cleanup? The real issue here is this project is going to be built on Crown land. It has Crown land for the next 20 years. Who's going to do the cleanup after 20 years? Very questionable. As well, the projects don't seem to have the resources to be able to deal with any sort of potential disaster. Rocket crash, environmental disaster, something goes wrong, who's going to pay? It's not very clear. And then on top of this, we have the involvement of the Ukrainian space companies with their long history of corruption and malfeasance on international projects. This should be a great concern to everybody. And I really hope that after this truly comes out and we know the full details of the project, that both the federal and provincial governments will look very seriously at this project and see if they have the proper resources to be able to do it. If not, it's going to be another one of the long list of Atlantic Canada's failures and fiascos. There has been no shortage of these projects in the past that have gone south, and who always ends up holding the bag? It's the province, and by that, you, the taxpayers, that are responsible. Thank you for your time. Do as the cup says, and we hope to see you for the next episode.